Niccolò Machiavelli is often portrayed as a villain in history, and not without justification. He challenged established moral norms, rejected Christian doctrines, and questioned the very nature of goodness. Instead of upholding traditional virtues, Machiavelli devised a systematic approach where cruelty and deception became acceptable methods to gain and retain power. His philosophy is a tangled mix of contradictions, blending deep insights with the endorsement of ruthless behavior and relentless resolve. Yet when we dig deeper into his ideas beyond the controversial label, we uncover unsettling but relevant observations about how the modern world operates and how to maneuver within it. To truly grasp Machiavelli's concepts, we must consider his life and the historical period he lived through. Born in 1469 in Florence, he witnessed an era marked by intense political turmoil and social unrest. Although his family had noble roots, his father Bernardo, despite valuable connections, was the least wealthy of the lineage. Bernardo was a struggling lawyer, frequently unemployed, and wielded little real power despite his social ties. The contrasting influences of his parents also shaped Machiavelli's outlook. His father's religious doubt stood against his mother's profound faith. She composed hymns and poetry, giving him a pragmatic and critical lens from early on. At that time, Florence presented itself as a republic governed by democratic ideals. The city was managed by 8 officials, called priori, overseen by a figure akin to a prime minister. These leaders were elected every 2 months through a lottery, with only the city's most respected and accomplished men eligible. This system aimed to promote a steady rotation in leadership, preventing any one class or faction from monopolizing power. However, in reality, the government was deeply flawed. Constant leadership turnover led to inconsistent policies and disrupted governance. It was under these circumstances that the influential Medici family stepped in, rigging the lottery to ensure their supporters always held power. So while Florence was officially a republic, it effectively operated as a hidden dictatorship. Though Italy experienced fewer wars compared to other European regions, conflicts still happened intermittently. Unlike the widespread territorial wars elsewhere, Italian rulers often hired mercenaries and frequently shifted alliances to capitalize on emerging advantages. Machiavelli grew up in a society where the public perception of power was starkly disconnected from political reality. From a young age, he witnessed firsthand the chaos and corruption that plagued politics. He also learned the harsh consequences of failure. When he was nearly 9, he saw conspirators against the Medici hung upside down outside the main government building, left to decay for weeks. A brutal reminder of the ruthless nature of the political world surrounding him. These experiences left a lasting impression on Machiavelli and shaped the direction of his future. Although little is known about his early years, it is documented that he received a solid education. When the Medici family was expelled in 1494, Machiavelli secured a role within the Florentine government, initially working on drafting official papers. His career advanced swiftly, and by the age of 28, he had been appointed secretary of the Second Chancellery, one of Florence's key governmental offices, as well as secretary to the Ten of War, a body in charge of foreign affairs and military readiness. The exact reasons for his rapid rise remain unclear, as no records explain these promotions. While many downplay Machiavelli's political significance by labeling him a failure, this perspective overlooks the strength of his early career. For more than 10 years, he was Florence's leading diplomat. Although he didn't accomplish monumental achievements, it is hard to fault him, considering that Florence was the weakest among Italy's major city-states during a highly unstable era. In 1512, the Florentine Republic collapsed, and the Medici returned to power. Suspecting Machiavelli's involvement in a conspiracy against them, the Medici imprisoned and tortured him, and the following year, he was exiled. During this exile, Machiavelli penned his most renowned work, The Prince. While he authored other pieces, The Prince remains his most iconic and influential text, and it will serve as the foundation for much of our examination of Machiavellian philosophy. The Prince was written as a handbook for rulers, specifically addressed to Lorenzo de' Medici, the then head of the powerful Medici family, a point we will explore later. At that time, prevailing political thought held that the greatness of a leader was measured by their virtue and moral character. Though such ideals were not always realized in practice, they dominated political philosophy. Machiavelli's work broke entirely with this traditional mindset. He claimed that for a ruler, the foremost priority was to secure and preserve power. Success was not measured by goodness, but by the ability to create a strong and stable state. In doing so, Machiavelli decisively separated politics from ethics. His book was not a guide to living virtuously, but a manual for retaining control and wielding power effectively. Within this framework, he rejected the Christian moral outlook and dismissed conventional ethics as secondary. He did not deny morality's existence, but argued that a ruler could not always act morally if he wished to be successful. Such leadership demanded boldness and often required a degree of cruelty and daring. Nonetheless, Machiavelli believed these traits were essential to maintain authority. He could have tempered his message by saying something like, "One must act this way to hold power, but that does not mean power itself is inherently good." He might also have expressed contempt for those willing to maintain power by such means, thereby deflecting much of the criticism he later faced while still preserving his central argument. Throughout this brief book, Machiavelli systematically breaks down traditional ideas about morality and instead presents a disturbing, yet often uncannily accurate depiction of how power truly functions. A prime example is Cesare Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, who, with his father's backing, was in the process of creating a new state near Florence. In 1502, Borgia seized control of the area and quickly set out to expand his territories further. To maintain authority over the recently captured city, he left his trusted lieutenant, Ramiro de Lorca, in charge, instructing him to establish order by any means necessary. Borgia granted Lorca full freedom to exercise cruelty as he saw fit. Lorca wasted no time enforcing these harsh measures. Under his rule, men were executed publicly in front of their families, properties were seized, and opposition was crushed mercilessly. Resistors faced brutal punishments, including castration. As time passed, the city endured a reign of terror. The people living in constant dread grew to despise Lorca, and by extension, Borgia himself. When Borgia returned, he realized that Lorca's harshness had fostered deep resentment among the citizens. Months of brutality had made Lorca a symbol of tyranny, and this widespread hatred threatened Borgia's reputation. In a calculated move to safeguard his image, Borgia devised a ruthless plan. One quiet night, he ordered his men to arrest Lorca and execute him. Lorca's body was gruesomely split in two, and his severed head was displayed on a stake in the city's main square. The following morning, the townspeople discovered Lorca's mutilated corpse on public display. Rather than being horrified, they felt relief and even satisfaction at the death of the man who had terrified them for so long. Seizing the opportunity, Borgia appeared before the crowd and, with a deliberate lie, claimed that Lorca had acted independently, abusing his authority and committing atrocities without Borgia's approval. He portrayed Lorca as a deranged sadist who had betrayed the people's trust, justifying his execution as a necessary act to protect the city. With cold calculation, Borgia cast himself as the population's savior, cleansing his own reputation by sacrificing one of his most loyal followers. In The Prince, Machiavelli expresses profound admiration for Cesare Borgia. viewing him as the ideal example of effective leadership. While Machiavelli acknowledges the value of kindness, he stresses that a ruler cannot afford to be virtuous at all times if he wants to succeed. To him, politics is a relentless struggle where cruelty and harshness are often essential. Machiavelli argues that a leader cannot be confined by compassion, loyalty, humanity, or honesty. Exercising power frequently requires the opposite: cruelty, betrayal, inhumanity, and occasionally deceit. He raises a fundamental question: is it better for a ruler to be loved or feared? Though he concedes that ideally a leader would be both, Machiavelli insists that, in reality, it is safer to be feared. According to Machiavelli, people are unpredictable and inconsistent. Some are fearful, others dishonest, and many can be swayed or corrupted easily, no matter how much they claim to be loyal to a leader. On the other hand, fear is reliable. The possibility of punishment is a concrete tool that keeps individuals obedient. Affection can fade away, but fear endures. Altering people's beliefs is a far more difficult challenge than instilling fear. Machiavelli argues that love is beyond a ruler's control, but fear can be managed and directed. Still, he cautions about a fine line. Fear is useful, yet hatred must be avoided at all costs. Hatred, he warns, breeds plots and assassinations. If violence is needed, it must be executed quickly and quietly to prevent deep resentment among the populace. For Machiavelli, the perfect leader is one who is loved when possible, feared when necessary, but never hated. Niccolò Machiavelli did not hesitate to forsake honesty if the situation demanded it. While he acknowledged that honesty is a noble trait, he maintained that it is often impractical for those seeking to hold on to power. In his view, a shrewd leader who outwits rivals through cunning and strategy is far more effective than one who insists on always telling the truth. Deception, breaking promises, lying, and even betrayal are acceptable tactics in his philosophy. Since circumstances constantly evolve, a leader must be adaptable enough to revise commitments according to the moment. Although this may be morally questionable, Machiavelli saw it as essential for retaining power and strengthening the state. He also questions the necessity of truthfulness, pointing out that others will inevitably lie to you. Being consistently honest, he says, would be like disarming yourself while your enemies continue to use every weapon available. This pragmatic dismissal of honesty is reinforced by his belief that a leader need not truly possess virtues, but only appear virtuous to win the public's favor. Machiavelli insists that two things matter most: a credible image and tangible outcomes. Most people, he notes, judge their leader based on what they see and hear, rarely gaining insight into what happens behind closed doors. Therefore, public opinion depends on perception rather than a full understanding of the leader's actions. A leader's speech should appear guided by virtue, as this shapes public judgment. Meanwhile, his actions are judged by the results they produce, not the methods used. And as Machiavelli points out, honesty alone does not guarantee success. Moral qualities like virtue are not the defining factors in the struggle for power. This is the foundation of Machiavelli's legacy, or at least the reputation that made him so well known. His perspective is not inherently cruel, but accepts cruelty as a necessary option, embracing lying, deceit, and harm when needed to achieve objectives. What many call cynicism, Machiavelli preferred to see as realism. In various sections of his writings, Machiavelli claims that human beings are naturally selfish, deceitful, and unreliable. Therefore, to survive in such a world, a leader must be equally shrewd and cunning. However, reducing Machiavelli's thought to this simple view misses the deeper, more unsettling insights he offered. He also famously rejected Christianity as an effective solution for life's difficulties. In The Prince, he writes with contempt, I see that many people have believed and still believe that the world is ruled by God and fortune, and that no matter how clever men are, they cannot change this or protect themselves. With this statement, he almost mocks the belief that our fate is controlled by divine forces. In some ways, this perspective is empowering. It implies that you hold the reins of your life, not some supernatural power, so you should take action with that control. Machiavelli's approach is practical and direct, and his insights extend beyond politics to life itself, which he views as a continual struggle between virtue and fortune. Throughout The Prince, he frequently refers to the idea of virtue, which might initially be mistaken for morality or goodness. Yet this would be an incorrect reading. Machiavelli was not concerned with a simple binary of good versus evil, but rather with achieving success over failure and strength over weakness. His concept of virtue doesn't have a perfect equivalent in English, but can be understood as a set of qualities that enable a person to reach their objectives. These might include traits like bravery, boldness, intelligence, cunning, or any other ability necessary to secure victory. In a wider sense, virtue signifies the power to act and control one's own fate. Possessing this quality, Machiavelli argues, is what leads to genuine greatness. This strength is constantly challenged by fortune, which Machiavelli uses to symbolize luck or chance. He suggests that fortune governs about half of our lives, while the other half depends on our virtue. To illustrate, Machiavelli compares fortune to a river that floods and destroys a town and its inhabitants. This represents uncontrollable fate. Yet he argues that we can lessen the damage by preparing, building dikes and dams to face these unpredictable forces. Essentially, fortune only controls us when we allow it to. Being prepared, often motivated by fear, is crucial to handling changes in luck. He cautions that what works today may fail tomorrow because fortune is unpredictable. True expertise lies in the ability to adapt. For Machiavelli, it is vital to alter your behavior as conditions shift. You must either take control or be overwhelmed. Additionally, Machiavelli acknowledged a primal instinct within humans. He believed that beneath the social behaviors we display or preach, there lies a hidden, animalistic nature driven to fulfill its desires at any cost. In this regard, he was ahead of his time. Later psychologists like Carl Jung would call this the shadow, while Freud described it as the subconscious. Like other philosophers, Machiavelli believed we should not suppress the inner beast within us, but neither should we allow it to dominate. The secret lies in learning to harness its power and use it to our advantage. Whenever possible, act with ethics, kindness, and fairness. Yet when striving toward a goal, adopt the mindset of a beast. Be like a lion, whose mere presence intimidates hyenas, and like a fox, clever enough to avoid traps. Rigidly adhering to laws, morality, and social norms can only take you so far. Machiavelli offers a thought-provoking insight by distinguishing between how the world ought to be and how it truly is. This contrast, I believe, stands as one of the most sobering and accurate aspects of his teachings. He cautions that if you conduct yourself based on an idealized version of reality, ignoring the world as it functions, you are heading straight toward failure. He asserts that the world is no utopia. While there are good elements, it is far from wholly virtuous. Lies, deceit, and dangers are everywhere, and one must be ready to face them with strength and resilience. Accepting the world as it actually is, rather than how we wish it to be, greatly improves our chances of survival and success. In my view, this is the core of Machiavellian thought, beyond labels of evil or villainy. Still, putting these ideas into practice is not without challenges. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a gift to Lorenzo de' Medici, head of the influential Medici family, hoping to regain their favor and eventually secure a position. It's important to remember that this came after Machiavelli had been imprisoned, tortured, and exiled by the same family. Yet he never got the job he sought. Lorenzo apparently never even read The Prince, and even if he had, it's doubtful Machiavelli would have been appointed. Machiavelli recognized that, brilliant as his ideas were in theory, they might only serve as literary works rather than practical political advice. By endorsing tactics like deceit, betrayal, cruelty, and opportunism, his own philosophy undermined him. Who would want a man with such beliefs close by? How could anyone trust someone who openly promotes such ruthless and antisocial behavior? When laid bare, his doctrines become reasons for isolation. By championing this worldview, Machiavelli seemingly sacrificed personal acceptance. Who reads The Prince and desires to be friends with Niccolò Machiavelli? The answer is, understandably, almost no one. Though one might argue it's better to have him as an ally than as an adversary. Ultimately, his political career never rose to great prominence. He did not draft groundbreaking constitutions, lead revolts, or govern cities or states, despite his extensive theorizing on power and governance. Machiavelli never truly showed exceptional skill in putting his ideas into effective practice. In truth, there is no clear evidence that Machiavelli ever acted in a truly Machiavellian manner during his lifetime. It is possible he carried out his maneuvers with such subtlety and caution that history overlooked them, but the available records do not strongly support this idea. After the disappointment surrounding the prince, he stepped back from major political ambitions and instead devoted himself more to personal enjoyment. Machiavelli engaged in several romantic relationships and quickly found success writing comedic plays filled with romance and satire. Yet his deepest ambition remained a return to the political arena. At one point, a distant relative from the Medici family called upon him to provide counsel regarding a potential conflict between France and Spain. His task was to manage the defense of Florence. However, when the Spanish forces advanced, they merely encircled the city and went on to sack Rome with little opposition. The Medici fell from power once again, and Machiavelli lost favor, ending up unemployed and politically powerless. He soon fell ill and died, never having attained the political stature he had long sought. Though his career in politics was rather modest, Machiavelli's influence on history is undeniable. His writings, particularly The Prince, left a profound legacy. Released posthumously, the book quickly sparked controversy. An English cardinal went so far as to claim the book was penned by the devil himself, and Pope Paul IV promptly banned it. Meanwhile, in France, during a period of violent religious conflicts between Protestant Huguenots and Catholics, the country was ruled by the frail young King Charles IX. Yet real power was held by his mother, Catherine de' Medici. She was a Florentine Italian and daughter of Lorenzo de' Medici, the very person to whom the prince had originally been dedicated. In 1572, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre led to the slaughter of thousands of Huguenots, with Catherine blamed for the massacre. One survivor, Jean de la Gisella, authored a book that cemented Machiavelli's reputation as a villain. He depicted Catherine as an avid follower of Machiavelli's teachings and portrayed Machiavelli himself as the embodiment of Italian cruelty and wickedness. This distorted reading of Machiavelli's works quickly spread. Many readers, misunderstanding his ideas and taking them out of context, began to associate his philosophy with savagery and immorality. This misrepresentation became the dominant public perception. La Gisella's book was translated into Latin and English well before The Prince was accessible in those languages, allowing this negative portrayal of Machiavelli to infiltrate popular culture. Over time, the Machiavellian archetype became a staple in art, particularly theater and literature, linking Machiavelli's name with evil. Yet what Machiavelli actually argued was that Christian ethics and political pragmatism do not always align. Today, many might agree with this insight, but in his own era, his ideas were largely misunderstood. Although controversial from the start, Machiavelli's philosophy has been embraced by politicians worldwide. His concepts do not belong exclusively to virtuous or corrupt leaders, nor to dictators or democrats. In many ways, his reflections foreshadowed and even helped shape modern politics by accurately describing the tactics that operate behind the scenes of power. Today, politicians still feel the need to project a moral image and, whenever possible, to behave according to ethical standards. Yet it is impossible to overlook the clear gap between ethics and political goals, no matter the ideology or political stance. This observation is difficult to dispute. Personally, I never found the early discussions about Machiavelli especially engaging. However, when delving into his thoughts on life, the nature of the world, and how to navigate it, one uncovers a timeless wisdom, one that we often prefer to avoid facing. I admit that many of Machiavelli's more cynical ideas make me uncomfortable. I would never want to emulate someone like Cesare Borgia, nor would I wish to be governed by such a figure. I hold a strong belief in the fundamental goodness of people. Yet I imagine Machiavelli would ridicule this optimism, suggesting I'm trapped in illusions, clinging to an idealized notion of how the world ought to be rather than accepting how it actually is. Machiavelli's writings are marked by an unyielding resolve. He is unconcerned with virtue, religious morals, or personal loyalties. His attention centers exclusively on one pursuit: power. Though his perspective may not resonate with everyone, there is something striking about that single-minded determination, even if it doesn't fit the daily realities of most people. Like formidable villains, Machiavelli embodies a threat. Following his teachings without question can be perilous, yet completely dismissing them could prove just as hazardous.